The John Campea Show, in association with Designing Hollywood, presents... Welcome to the Designing Hollywood podcast. I am your host, Robert Meyer Burnett. The Designing Hollywood podcast is dedicated to all things movies, the movie industry, and its talented professionals. Today's episode is sponsored by the United American Costume Company. And today's guest is an Emmy Award-winning makeup artist for film and television, earning her 6 Guild Award nominations and 2 wins next to the 11 Emmy noms and 1 win. Amazing. She has been working in television and film for over 30 years, helping to create both the non-prosthetic and prosthetic makeup for some of the most well-known shows. She's created looks from everything from Star Trek Enterprise to Nip Tuck to The Practice to Felicity to the Gilmore Girls, Mad Men, House of Lies, Castle, and my beloved Twin Peaks. Her work in film includes The Hunger Games: Catching Fire and Mockingjay Part 2, A Star is Born, Pitch Perfect 1, and that changed the trajectory of her whole career. After graduating from UCLA, her focus was to become a costume designer for film and television, but after her first project in the costume department, she realized she had a huge passion for makeup, especially special effects makeup. She enrolled in makeup school and then started at Roger Corman Studios as a makeup artist. She has said in a previous interview, she chooses projects that allow her to tell stories through the beauty of makeup. And without further ado, and I'm going to geek out in this interview, so I warn all of you listening now, and I want to say this to Debbie, without further ado, please welcome Emmy Award-winning Debbie Zoller to the Designing Hollywood podcast. It is so great to have you here, and I'm sorry there's so many things you've worked on. I'm going to turn into a big nerd in this interview.
Well, thank you for having me.
It's so good to have you. I have so many questions, but I first want to start out. I have to mention, since Marilyn Vance is one of the executive producers and creators of this podcast, you actually did her makeup for a magazine cover that we use to promote the show. Did you not?
Right. Well, the Costume Design Guild puts out a magazine. I believe it's 4 times a year. And Anna Wyckoff and Salvador Perez asked me if I would come and do makeup for the covers of the magazines with all the different costume designers. And I was honored to do it. I love doing it. I've got to, meet so many of the costume designers that I ultimately end up working with as well. So it's really an honor to be involved with that.
Well, that I couldn't talk to you without mentioning that,
Yeah. Well, and Marilyn's, she's amazing. She's a legend.
She is such a legend. That's how I wound up on doing this podcast in the first place. I was just like, oh my God, you're the Marilyn Vance.
Right. So, exactly.
But we were talking a little bit before the interview started, and I'm curious, how did you find yourself, obviously, in the industry? When I first moved to LA and got out of film school, the point was to either get a job working for Roger Corman or across the city working for Charlie Band.
Right.
And
right.
On, low budget genre pictures, which was the way to go. How did you get into the business, and was it something you always wanted to do? And how did you find yourself at Corman?
For me, it was really an accident. I don't really have those stories of, I wanted to be a makeup artist since I was 5 years old. I went to UCLA, and many of my classes were in North Campus, which is where the film students would hang out. And I met a bunch of them and had classes with them. I took a makeup class and I really enjoyed it. And many of the students in there who were film students asked if I would come and help them with costumes and paint sets and do their student projects. And so I just started getting involved in that just for fun. And when after I graduated college, one of my friends from UCLA had called and said, hey, I'm associate producing this really low budget movie. We'll basically pay you $1.18 an hour. Do you want to come and do it? And I said, sign me up. So you don't know any better. So of course you do it. You just say yes. The door opens and you walk through. And I did. And that really started me off on my career. But I originally thought I wanted to become a costume designer. And after doing that film, it was called Survival Quest, and we were filming in the Angeles National Crest Forest. And after doing that film, I realized how much I enjoyed doing makeup and special effects makeup as opposed to doing costume. I really more had a passion for doing makeup. And I think because I had to do laundry every night for all the actors and dealing with some of the things you would find in their clothes, which I don't want to get too graphic. I decided to go a different direction.
I would be remiss if I did not mention that this ball from Phantasm, the Silver Sphere, was from the great Don Coscarelli's Phantasm saga, and he directed Survival Quest.
Yes, he did.
And he still managed to maintain. He's one of the nicest men that I've met in the industry. So
I still follow him. He's on Facebook, and he's still very much out there, very much a part of this industry. I really enjoyed working with him.
Yeah, I mean, he's been great, and he truly is an independent maverick. He's managed to keep his independence, which I think is great. And his later stuff, like even John Dies at the End, is a lot of fun.
Right.
So
but from there I went to Corman and stayed there for I think 18 months.
Wow. Now, when you were at Corman, what did you work on? Did you work on anything?
Oh my gosh. You know, I wish I'd been prepared. There was one called Deadly Dreams, Saturday the 14th.
Yep, that's what I was gonna, yeah.
Oh my God. I wish I could remember the names. This is going back 30 years
now.
No,
it's great though. I mean, and when you were working at Corman, what was that environment like? I mean, you probably didn't have enough money or enough time, but was it exhilarating?
Right. It was. And all of the people that passed through there, the people that I worked with, Janusz Kaminski, Faden Papa Michael, Mauro Fiore, John Winfrey, who's a producer, Adam Moss, who is a producer at Sony, his wife now, Angela Moss, who's also a makeup artist. I still see all these people. I still talk to all these people.
Yeah.
Many of the actresses and actors that I met at that time, I still have, relationships with. It was a very special time to be working at Roger Corman. You had no time, you had no money. So you just had to figure it out on the fly. And like, I learned that fake blood freezes over 3,000 feet. So when you're doing a rig and with a slit neck and you're pumping the blood and you're over 3,000 feet, it doesn't want to pump the same. So these are all things that you learn on, while you're working. So it was the best school for people behind the scenes that did not go to film school.
Right.
So that was our film school.
Yeah. And it was trial by fire. I mean, I sort of had the same experience, but at Charlie Band on the other side of the hill.
Right.
We didn't have the beach.
Right.
Couldn't walk to the beach.
I so respect Roger and Julie, his wife. I don't know where my career would be if I hadn't started there.
Right. And I mean, the stuff you learned, you can't learn anywhere else.
Right.
I mean, now I've got to ask, just because I see the films that you've done, and if I didn't ask about things like Poison Ivy, which was, come on, a video staple, people that was on cable. I probably saw that movie 100 times.
Yeah.
Kat Shea directed it, and
I know, and her husband. Yeah.
I mean, if
that was a great experience.
I mean, if you look at who was in Poison Ivy, the cast, Leonardo DiCaprio, Cheryl Ladd, Tom Skerritt, Drew Barrymore, Sarah Gilbert. What was it like working on a film like that with all people that, I mean, I guess Cheryl Ladd had been Charlie's Angel, and Tom Skerritt had been in Top Gun and Alien, but Drew Barrymore and Sarah Gilbert and Leonardo DiCaprio were all on the rise. Their stars were all on the rise.
Right.
Any did you enjoy working on a movie like that?
Oh,
A
it
cult
was
favorite.
fantastic. Yeah. It was a brilliant, it was so much fun. And you didn't realize at the time, like what we were actually making. And you didn't think it would become this like cult film that it did, but it was great. It was really great. And I think Sarah just came out on an interview with Drew Barrymore on her show that was her first female kiss.
Oh,
So it was it was a very special moment. These girls were, 16 years old, 17 years old.
yeah,
And really, I just felt like, more of a mother in that respect, just trying to take care of them and
right.
protect them. So,
Well, to that end, working in film, I've often said to people that some of the key hires on any movie, and you cannot take this for granted, are hair and makeup people. Because that's your first line as a producer. That's your first line of defense. Your actors, hair and makeup and costume have to have great relationships with actors, because the actors don't want to worry about how they look. And when you have a great makeup artist, an actor's job is half of it. You're helping them out. I wonder if you could sort of speak to sort of the philosophy of being a makeup artist, and what is it like? I guess you're part therapist, part Rembrandt,
right.
you know.
It's all of the above, because it's the trust issue. When an actor or an actress sits down in my chair, I have to gain that trust within the first 5 minutes of having them sit there. If they feel like they don't trust me and can count on me to help them build their character, then I've kind of lost them for the rest of the show. So it's really important to me to have a relationship and to have them participate in building their character along with the costume designers, because the costume designer sets the tone. They meet them before we do. They set the color palettes. They meet, with the DP as well prior to us being even involved. But I tell my story through makeup. So every character that I design, I'm fitting my elements into what the elements of a costume designer, the DP, the director, and the actor have already discussed. So it's a very collaborative effort. But in the same respect, it's not even about the makeup that I put on. It's how you come in the morning every day. You're the first person they see every day. So you have to have a good attitude, a good spirit. Sometimes you have music playing in the trailer that they like, that they request.
Yeah.
Sometimes they don't want music at all. And you have to read the room and kind of respect how they come into their character.
Right.
So all of those elements, like with Poison Ivy, those girls, like I said, they were so young. It was more of a therapist, mother, caretaker, cheerleader in that respect, to get them to set and to make them feel comfortable.
Do you have, I guess, what are some of the tricks of the trade? Like when you see somebody, do you look at their complexion first? How does a makeup artist begin to design for an actor? Where do you start?
Wow. Well, that's a really good question. I think everyone, has a different approach of how they come to it, but I will read the script strictly in the beginning just for pure enjoyment, so that I can let my juices start flowing in a respect. Then I go back and I start to break it down, and I start to see the characters' arcs and see what they're bringing to the table. And I start to design it so that I'm telling a story before they've even spoken a word. So when you first see a character on screen, you kind of have an idea, like, oh, this person has, tattoos, you kind of know, okay, well, maybe they're, more street than they are, worldly, or,
Sure.
you have these different adjectives that you want to describe them. And so subconsciously, I'm telling people who this character is before they've even said anything. And the same with costumes. I follow a lot of what their color palette, and, if they're completely covered in long sleeves, then I can't put a tattoo on them.
Right.
But, so we discuss things like that. So it really helps to design a character, having the knowledge of what the designer is doing.
Now, you obviously, makeup artists tend to work with the same, actors, they develop relationships with them. You had a long-standing relationship with Danny Aiello.
Right.
How, one of my favorite actors. He always classed up the joint. Whenever you saw him, what an amazing performer. How did that relationship begin? Where did you first meet him?
Well, I met him through Kim Delaney, who I met at Corman. I did a movie with her called The Drifter. There's another one. Yeah. And Kim was married to Joe Cortese, who is really good friends with Danny Aiello. And they were doing a film out here, a non-union movie. And Joe introduced me to Danny, and that's how I ended up working with Danny for so long. And I was strictly doing, both his makeup and his hair. It was just easier. And I became very good friends with his wife, Sandy, and the kids and the grandkids. And it was a very long-standing relationship, which, Danny's not easy, and sometimes was his own worst enemy in certain cases, but aren't we all? And, but I'm really grateful, because he believed in me before I believed in myself as a makeup artist.
Sure.
And I think just having that support, I felt like maybe, I made the right choice of careers.
Yeah. It's funny. One of the movies that you worked on, 2 Days in the Valley, right, that he was in, is another one of these films with in the wake of Tarantino's Pulp Fiction and Reservoir Dogs. Everybody wanted to do sort of these Tarantino-esque films, and one of my favorites is 2 Days in the Valley. But the cast, you look at these, everybody, Danny Aiello, but Jeff Daniels and Terry Hatcher and Peter Horton and Marsha Mason, Paul Mazursky, right, James Spader, who I can never get enough of, Charlize Theron, Keith Carradine, and Louise Fletcher. Mm-hmm. When you work on a movie like that, were you ever like, wow, I'm surrounded by unbelievable mountains of talented people here? What is it like when you're a makeup artist like that? Are you ever starstruck?
Yes, but you can't let on that you are.
Right.
I think that's one of the biggest things as a makeup artist, that you have to try and control that. I think, working with the caliber of actors that I've worked with in my career, Lady Gaga, especially Lady Gaga, you have to be really, really careful not to, get to a point where they feel uncomfortable because you're a fan.
Right.
So that's something that you really have to curtail somehow on your own. I do have to say, the one time I was working, it was North and South Part 3, and Peter O'Toole came into my trailer, and my knees were knocking, and I loudly. And I was just, it was such an honor to work with him. And I needed to do something to relax. And at that time, I had a dartboard put up at one end of the makeup and hair trailer. And he came in with his Galois cigarette, and he was like, "So here, who plays darts?" And I was like, "I do." And he's like, "Let's play." And
yeah, he's a Brit. You're gonna.
Yes. And I said, okay. And so we played darts before I even put his makeup on,
Wow.
which was great because I felt so like much more calm than, if he had just sat down in my chair, because he is such a living legend.
Oh man. Yeah. Um, so I find that the relationships that you have with talent, like you said, that they have to trust you. Once they do that and they keep, do you get hired by them? Like, did Danny Aiello, how does that work? Do they have to build in, does an actor build you into their deal, or do you have to go to the
Yes, many
producer?
times. Many times I'm in an actor's contract, or in other cases, like I work with Rebel Wilson. She'll just request me. I'm not part of the contract, where other times you will be in an actor's contract. It just depends on the situation. Actors get certain perks. So, they can ask for certain things, which is really nice. And it helps ease their tension coming into a project. If they know they have their makeup artist, they have their hairstylist that they're comfortable with, they have their costumer that they're comfortable with. All of those things help an actor when they get to set to know that they're going to be taken care of, and they don't have to worry about any of those things except be an actor.
Right. Right. Which is part of your job,
Right.
to alleviate those things. Now, you've worked in both special effects makeup and then what would you call it? Actor makeup. There's a word. What would be the
Beauty.
word? Yeah,
We call
beauty
it
makeup.
beauty and special effects.
Beauty
Right.
and special effects. Could you talk a little bit about the differences between the two so people sort of understand? Because I think a lot of people don't.
Sure. Basically, to be a makeup artist in the union, you have to, have a certain amount of experience and responsibilities, and then you have to apply, and you have to have a certain amount of hours. So for years, you work towards getting into our union. And to be a well-rounded makeup artist, the demands of a show are usually beauty, makeup for both men and women. Men more so with grooming, beards, mustaches, things like that. Sometimes you have to be able to put a beard on, so that still falls under beauty. But we also do, cuts, bruises, prosthetics. You have to know all of it. So I think in the very beginning, when I first started, people were kind of surprised that a female likes to do special effects makeup. And I really enjoy it because I came from, the horror genre, and, where people were getting slashed and, beat up and, sliced open and things like that. And I love that. And I remember the writers on Castle would watch me read a script every episode, because there was always like the dead body du jour. And so they would watch me and I would be like reading it. And as soon as I got to the dead body, my face would light up, they said. So then they started like writing more, because they knew what we could deliver in both the beauty aspect and the special effects aspect. So it's a really important thing to be able to, talk about beauty and create a look for both men and women, but at the same time, be able to go that extra distance and do facial hair, prosthetic work, and working with all the labs. Like, I think you worked at Tony Gardner's.
Yes, I worked at Alterian Studios. Yeah.
Right. And so I would go into the labs and talk with the sculptors and saying, approving, this is what I want. And they would take, my requests and they would create it. So it's a really important thing to be able to mesh the two of those together.
Right. Absolutely. And you've worked on a lot of really, really prestigious genre entertainment. And I think it sort of brings me to, obviously you have a long-standing relationship with director David Lynch.
Right.
and his movies frequently have interesting beauty makeup, but also some really
Right.
interesting
Right.
effects makeup.
Right.
How did you come to work on Lost Highway? How did you meet David Lynch, and what was that relationship like, and how does a makeup artist interact with the director?
Well, interestingly enough, Patricia Norris, the costume designer and production designer that works for David, interviewed me. And she and I got along famously, which is how I ended up getting hired on Lost Highway. And I miss Patricia immensely. She was an amazing force to be reckoned with. And I learned so much from her that I just kept, the relationship with David, and I loved working with David. He's so, as an artist, can talk to another artist in a way that most directors haven't quite figured out yet. So David and I can talk on a different level than I would normally on, with other directors, because there's, actors, directors, there's creative directors, there's technical directors. As a makeup artist, I have to figure out very quickly the best way to communicate with a director of whichever project that I'm working on. And working with David, it's definitely the artistic side.
Yeah, I mean, and of course, you did work on Twin Peaks, and I can only imagine it has to have been a hoot to work with him.
It is, and to see people who haven't worked with him before come in and be in his presence, I actually get the biggest chuckle out of it, because I remember those days,
Sure.
But every day working with him is such a blessing. And I would be sitting on set on Twin Peaks: The Return, and I would look around and I would see all these people, in their phones, and I'm like, boy, are you missing out on the gold? You should basically be putting your phone away and just, absorbing the atmosphere, because the way David works is not normal. It's very unusual. He used to play music before each scene on Lost Highway, so we knew what the tempo and the theme of that particular scene was. Now on Twin Peaks: The Return, he did it in his own headphones, so we weren't necessarily privy to it, because it was a very hush hush project, The Return. So I didn't even have a script. I was not allowed to have one. I would sit I would sit at David's house and read the script.
So did that ever interfere with your prep or knowing what you were supposed to do?
I asked if I could take notes, because I needed to have some kind of an idea for continuity. And Sabrina, his producer, said, yes, I could take notes, but it had to be almost like hieroglyphics. Like if somebody happened to, like if I lost my notebook, if somebody happened to pick it up and read it, that they weren't allowed to know. So I had to write everything in code.
Wow.
Yeah. And then we had a safe in the trailer, the production trailer, with a script in it that was, behind lock, key, the whole thing. And if I needed to check a reference for something, I had to get permission to go into the safe, get the script, open the script, look at the notes, compare my notes, and then that person would put the script back in the safe.
Wow.
Yeah.
That I can only, obviously there's a lot of interest in that show and they don't want to give anything away. So I can understand. I think and I consider myself part of the reason that kind of happens, because I'm a raving fanboy. So to find out any scrap of information, we'll want to find that out, which is why they have to hide scripts from people like me.
Right. Well, and you are one of many. So
yeah, especially with Twin Peaks. I mean, and watching that watching that show unfold was a tremendous joy, because
Right.
boy, you just never knew it was going to happen.
No, I
So,
know. It was such an honor to be a part of that.
well, you've worked both in television and film. I mean, some of the TV shows you worked on, not just Twin Peaks, but you also worked on Mad Men, which is one of the great TV shows of all time. Now that had to have been fun with all of the make, especially the women, that 60s vibe, and even the guys, they all, was that a fun show for you to work on?
Yeah, the first season was amazing because it was so new and nobody knew about it yet.
Right.
And all of these actors, I didn't know any of them at the beginning. The only one I knew was Brian Batt, who I had worked with on a movie called Jeffrey in New York with Patrick Stewart.
Yeah.
And the production manager called me and said, we're doing this show for AMC. I didn't even know what AMC was at the time. And I remember it showed classic films, but I didn't know that they were doing their own programming. And he listed off all the actors, John Hamm, January Jones. I didn't know any of these people. The very last person he said was Brian Batt. And I said, I'll take it. And he said, you're going to take it because of Brian Batt? And I said, yes.
And he was great in it too. Yeah. I mean, when you're working on something like a Mad Men, do you do a lot of research? Like,
the research is the most important thing. You have to have that research on hand, especially with Matt Weiner, the director, producer, writer. He was very focused on making sure that everything that was put in front of that camera was true to period. So I was, always showing him designs and advertisements from magazines like Life and some of the other magazines of the 50s and 60s. I did quite a bit of research. A lot of the research actually, though, came from my own family. Going back, with my parents and looking at their photo albums, my brothers and sisters who were, much older than me, who, had pictures from the 50s and 60s. So it was actually, for all of us, quite a personal experience. I had talked to Matt about one of the scenes that he was doing with January and the young girl that plays her daughter. And I told him a story of Mrs. Pitzer, who was a babysitter of mine, locked me in the closet when I was not being very good. And my mother never believed me, but Mrs. Pitzer would lock me in the closet until, and so finally I just got so quiet in there. I cut all the buttons off of the coats in the closet. And because it was also a sewing closet along with the coats that were hanging in there.
Sure.
And I would cut all the buttons off and sew the buttons on different coats. And that was something that Matt thought was hysterical. And he wrote it into Mad Men.
Yeah.
So,
wow. Now, do you prefer working on a television series, or do you like movies? Or are they both as equally for you?
They provide you with different things. So I think that's why I enjoy going back and forth. Movies have a different vibe to them. The pace isn't as fast.
Right.
The problem is that now they're packing so much into, every film that you do feel like the pace has sped up that matches an episodic television show.
Right.
But, usually they don't do as many pages a day on films, but now, especially with streaming, they're kind of getting to the point where they're more similar than they are not.
Right. Right. Especially because the streaming shows are becoming more and more elaborate, and they're shot more cinematically.
Right. And now every film has a deal with a streaming service, I think because of COVID. And if people don't want to go into a theater, they've, upgraded their own home theaters to a
Yes.
point where, they have their chairs that lean back, and they're huge screen TVs, and they enjoy the experience just as much as going to a theater.
Did the switch, I mean, obviously you worked in TV, but did the switch now from film to digital capture technology, did that pose a problem for you? Did you have a transitional period? I worked on Superman Returns, which was one of the first films they used the Genesis cameras, and
Right.
Tom Siegel, the director of photography, had to do a lot of tests to see,
Yes.
because color looked just different, and makeup, it was a big issue.
Everything looked different on digital. There was a big learning curve, and the DPs and makeup, we were all in it together. There's a DP that I've worked with for years named Darren Akuda, and he was one of the cinematographers that went around helping different unions and different, departments making that transition.
Mm.
So it was very important that we learned as they were learning, because the lenses were different, the lighting was different. We had to change products. The digital, you see things that you can't see to the naked eye on film, because film has that more dreamy like quality, where digital, the pixels make it so crisp that you
Right.
can't hide anything. Football games look great on digital. The ocean looks great. Nature, not necessarily look great on digital. So we had to come up with a lot of new techniques.
Yeah, and it was a really interesting time coming out of special effects makeup. Even things, even blood, had the color of blood became an issue.
Right. Right.
Speaking of blood, you worked on Kill Bill 1 and 2 for Mr.
did.
Tarantino, and blood was a big factor.
Blood was a huge factor. I got yelled at because I grabbed the wrong color blood.
Well, I mean, I obviously Tarantino has a long-standing relationship with K&B,
Right.
the effects company, and I had heard, and I don't know if this is true, that Quentin wanted different kinds of blood throughout the film, that he was looking at various bloods from Chinese movies and Japanese movies, because there's different kinds of blood. Was that something that did that affect you at all?
Oh, absolutely. The knives had to have a specific blood that K&B made, because the blood, it couldn't coagulate, it would beat up. So they had to make a very specific blood, and the color of the blood, the brightness of the blood had to be very, very specific. And then there was other bloods that we would use on clothing, and then other bloods that would be used on skin. So it was very important to Quentin. He's very meticulous about that. And when we got back from China to the States, the blood had been packed, and it ended up on, I think, the prop truck. And I was sent back to go get it. And I didn't grab the one on the prop truck. I grabbed the one on the makeup truck. And so I grabbed the wrong one, and I paid the price.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Well,
But it was fine. It was fine. You take it. You just take it.
right.
That's what you do. You just take it and you move on. So.
Now, being that I am a massive Star Trek fan, I guess that's kind of even an understatement for me to say massive Star Trek fan. It's my religion. I would be remiss if I did not ask you about your time working on Star Trek.
Oh, that was the best. I met Michael Westmore through a hairdresser that I had worked with on a film in New York with Danny Aiello. And I told her how much I wanted to get into that world and that genre, and how Michael Westmore, basically framed my childhood with Land of the Lost and all of those characters that, you know, from all those different shows. And
Marshall, Will, and Holly.
Yeah. And I went in to meet him and I had tears in my eyes. I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm actually sitting here talking to you. And he became one of my greatest mentors.
He's
and
such a nice man too.
Oh, amazing. And his family, you know, Marvin, his brothers and Monty. I had the opportunity to work with all of them and you know, their children. They're just an amazing, amazing family and incredibly talented. And I was so grateful to have that opportunity. And I started on Next Generation. I was there for 3.5 years.
Yeah, I mean, it's an amazing, that cast was amazing. And the things that you got to do, I mean, you know, how many makeup designs did they come up with? I mean, you guys, what was it like, you know, when working on that was back when it was interesting because Star Trek was the first show, the Next Generation proved that syndication could work. Mm-hmm. That first run dramatic and Star Trek, people forget it was huge in syndication. And you were doing 26 episodes a season back then. Not now it's like, well, 8 or 10, 13 if you're doing a lot on a streaming show. What was it like? I mean, the pace had to have been pretty tough, and you had all kinds of prosthetics and two of your principal cast, whether it was Brent Spiner or Michael Dorn, had to spend hours in the makeup trailer every single day. Right. What was that? Was that show? Did it have that? Was the pace rigorous? Was it a lot of work?
It was a lot of work. There were times when, you know, Michael, though, is so organized and creative that, you know, he had that show. It was a well-run machine.
Right.
You know, and there was the trailer and then there was the upstairs lab. And so I would go back and forth from the makeup trailer to the upstairs lab, depending on who I was doing at the time. And there were times when what he would do basically is he would say, put these pieces together and make this alien and paint it this color. And then once that person was done, they would go up to Rick Berman's office to get approval. And if Rick was like, yeah, that's great, then that was going to be the next alien. If Rick was like, nah, I don't know about this, can you change some things? It would go back and things would be changed. And, you know, but I'm telling you, that was one of the most well-oiled run machines. It was amazing. I would go in sometimes at 2:00 in the morning to get some of these pieces out of, you know, the prosthetics out of the oven because they were foam pieces.
Yeah.
And they still smelled of sulfur as we're putting them on people's faces, you know, 2.5 hours later, because we were going through so much because those shows were huge. They had huge casts and huge background numbers. And Michael just, you know, had it down where sometimes we would have 2 crews. We would come in the morning and there would be the crew that would put the makeups on. And then there would be the removal crew at night because we had to have a certain amount of hours turnaround before we could go back the next day.
Yeah. Wow.
So, yeah. But I still to this day work with Jonathan Frakes all the time. And he's just such a joy. And I'm so happy for him because all of the shows, he's still continuing in that genre and directing.
Yeah, I mean, he played Riker again in Star Trek Picard. He's been directing episodes of the new series Strange New Worlds, and he's had quite the career as a TV director as well. Right. I mean, he does a ton of work.
Right.
Well, on Star Trek, you met somebody that we have in common, which is William Shatner.
Right.
And you were on Generations, and then you did some work for him, specifically on his Star Trek Memories documentary and the Captain's Log documentary he did. What was it like working with Shatner? And I've heard you have a Shatner story to tell.
Oh, well, I did. Yeah. These retrospectives with all of the crew from the original Star Trek cast. And so that's how I met William Shatner. And, you know, he's a legend. himself, and I just so respect him. And he's just the consummate professional, and
Yep.
is so smart and so witty that, it's just, he's such a pleasure to be around. And, he had a lot of, some of his own personal makeup artists as well on certain projects. So there were projects when I would do them and other projects when I wouldn't. But so I believe the Twin Peaks year that we were nominated for the Emmys, and we were at the party. I had just lost again. I was starting to become the Susan Lucci of Emmy nominations and not winning, which is fine. I mean, listen, to be nominated is truly an honor, because you are recognized by your peers. And that to me is the highlight of my career, to be recognized like that. And William Shatner was sitting behind me at the party on these couches, and I'd had a couple of cocktails in me by that time. And I got up and I walked over. He was with his wife at the time. And I walked over and I said, Mr. Shatner, I don't know if you remember me. My name is Debbie. I'm a makeup artist. I met you, through Michael Westmore on Star Trek, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, yes, of course I remember you. And I said, I just lost my umpteenth Emmy. I think that was 9 or 10 at that point. And I said, it would be the honor of my night if I could take a picture with you, because then I would truly feel like a winner. And he said, get over here. And he took a picture, and it's on my Instagram page.
Oh, well, since you brought that up, you are on Instagram. Where can people follow you on Instagram?
At Debbie Zoller Makeup.
Oh, okay, good.
Pretty simple.
Now, when you worked on The Practice, was he on The Practice then? Did he come back, or was that?
No,
that was
no,
before.
that was
because he came in later.
After. Yeah. Cameron Manheim brought me onto The Practice.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
She was great on that show.
She was
so great.
Yeah.
But then you've also worked on, I'm curious, you worked on Pirates of the Caribbean at World's End, which I'm a huge fan. That was the third movie. And I'm a huge fan of that film. And in those movies, they did a lot of, I guess you'd call it CG makeup. There was a lot of makeup that was put on to the creature effects and things like that. Did you do any kind of prosthetic work or special effects makeup on that? I don't quite. I just know that you worked on it. But that film in particular, those movies did some really groundbreaking stuff.
Yes.
Using both practical physical effects makeup and CG makeup. It was like the first time they did that. Is there anything on that show that stood out to you, or what was it like working on that?
Oh, that I worked on Pirates 2 and 3 because they shot them at the same time. And V. Neal was the department head and the designer. Joel Harlow was her right hand man.
Yeah.
And he came up with many of the designs on that as well. And I was lucky enough to be able to be a hired gun on that show, and was going back and forth doing Johnny's doubles and hand drawing all of his tattoos that Johnny has onto all of his doubles. There's a scene where he's in a dream and there's all these different, I want to say Johnny's, of his character all over the boat that he's talking to and interacting with. And all of those people were, had to be done from head to toe to look exactly like him. So I was doing that. I was doing a lot of the pirates. I was doing a lot of the doubles. Stellan, who had all the shells and everything and the barnacles, I was helping doing his double, and many of the other pirate doubles. I had a mushroom man that was sitting in those baths, which was amazing, that was growing moss on him. And yeah, we were doing lots of different makeups. That's what I mean by it's great to be able to jump from one aspect to another. And V was the one that, trusted me with the different pirates that came for that big meeting.
Right.
There was the female Asian one that was blind. So we put contacts in her, and I was in charge of her makeup. And then the other one, who I call the Schnauzer, he had this big beard that in the wind, he would look like a Schnauzer. So, it was such a huge learning curve, especially with the guys that would come up out of the water, like the Hammerhead, and those guys were CG,
right?
But there were quite a few that, we were putting prosthetics on, and
yeah, they were huge. Those are huge shows, huge. All kinds of,
and they would combine them. Sometimes there would be spots where, the green fabric for green screen would be incorporated into the makeup. So,
yeah,
that was one of the best experiences. I loved working on those movies.
Yeah, I mean the third one, especially the just the fantasy sequences and the things that they. Mm-hmm. I mean, the dreams I had when I was a little kid were put on screen in that, specifically that third film. I mean, I love and what they did. I mean, it was really groundbreaking. I mean, they don't do a lot of that as much as they like the Bill Nye character and all that stuff that they were doing with the Davy Jones and all that stuff. I mean, they did some incredible groundbreaking work.
Right. Exactly.
Has your job changed over the years, or has it stayed pretty much? I mean, has makeups and the technology, and there's a lot more CG than there used to be. Mm-hmm. Have things changed, or have they has your job pretty much stayed the same?
I would say my job has gotten harder over the years. Because
why is that?
Well, especially with COVID, I'm doing a lot of other jobs at the same time as trying to department head and be a makeup artist. I have to, schedule COVID testing and travel flights for people. And I have to be an accountant now. And I find it's very difficult to be, moving those hats all over the place and still trying to be creative, because I get so bogged down with the business side of everything. So, trying to juggle all of those things at the same time is not easy. So my job has definitely gotten harder, especially because scripts have gotten bigger. And so now you've got a lot more on your plate than, I would say 20 years ago. Wow. So, but again, it's still, I still have passion for it. I still enjoy it. It's just now things are a little different in the aspects of what's expected of a department head or a designer or even a hired hand as a makeup artist.
The job itself, though, in terms of the relationship you have with actors, and like you said, building that kind of trust, that hasn't changed much, though, has it?
No,
yeah, I would imagine actors are eternal in terms of what they're like.
Yeah, thank God. No, that's the thing that keeps me coming back, are those relationships and the creativity, and to see those characters come alive. You look at an actor and you think what they're doing is so subtle. How is that going to read? And then you see it in dailies or on film, and it's amazing how they make everything come to life.
Right. Absolutely. Now, there's other movies you worked for Marvel on Thor: The Dark World.
I was hired for that was Alan's film. I was hired to do the reshoots because they shoot most of the Marvel projects in Atlanta.
Yeah.
And my friend Douglas No, who works with Tom Hiddleston, was doing the reshoots and called me in to help him with the Zach Levi character.
Right.
So,
right.
yeah. And to do some of the doubles and things like that.
Yeah. And then you also went from that to the Hunger Games.
Right.
And there's a lot, I would imagine that when you get into the city, when Panem, that there's a lot of, especially all the different, like the Stanley Tucci character. Was there a lot of fun makeups to do on Hunger Games?
Well, for Hunger Games, I was the supervisor for the crowd. So I had 1,500 background and
God.
45 makeup artists that I was in charge of. So I had to make sure that everybody got on the bus in the mornings and that we all made it there accordingly, and to get 1,500 background through the works every day, and to make sure that those makeups were what V. Neal, who was the designer of the film, made sure that I had to make sure that those designs were according to her instructions. So
that is, I mean, how do you manage something like that?
Luckily, we had amazing artists, and they, the fact that I respect them and what they bring to the table, they respect me for what I bring to the table, and making sure that everybody's taken care of, that people are fed, that they, have water, that they have the tools that they need, that they have, the photos, references that they need. It's all a part of it. So if you take care of them, they will take care of you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And then you also worked on Mockingjay as well, the second one. So was that the same thing? Were you working was V. Neal on that as well?
Yes, V was also on that, and Nicoletta the same. I was one of just the regular background makeup artists on that, and had a great time. And so that, I think that's one of the reasons why they called me back to help run the background when they needed it.
Now, you also, one of my favorite TV shows. I mean, I know you worked on things like Fosse Verdon. I'm a huge Bob Fosse fan. I love that. It was great too. All That Jazz is one of my favorite movies, and they dealt with the making of that in the film. And then the Pitch Perfect movies.
Yeah.
What were those like to work? Were those a hoot for you?
Well, I only did the first one. So I loved that movie, again, because it was fresh, it was new, there wasn't anything out there like it. All of those girls, they just came together as a girl group and just grew together to be the closest of friends. And, I'm lucky because that film really helped kind of change the trajectory of my career in that respect, where I was doing a lot of character work. I was doing a lot of period shows, and this was modern day,
right?
And
contemporary.
So it was nice to be able to do something modern day that was also timeless in that respect. And Jason, the director, who I love, Jason Moore, we just did a film together last year, 10 years later now, called Shotgun Wedding. It's another movie with Aiello, and we were in the Dominican Republic, and we had a great time. So, it's just so nice to be with people. And I'm going to be doing another movie with Rebel soon in the next few months. So it's just really nice to be able to have those people, still in my life.
Yeah, when you're on a movie like Pitch Perfect, because you're dealing directly with the actors, do you get a sense that the movie is going to be good? Can
Absolutely.
You tell?
Yeah,
I would imagine, because that's where it's sort of that energy begins with you, seeing the actors. Because, I thought the first Pitch Perfect was delightful.
Yeah.
And I just can't imagine how much fun it would have been with that cast.
It was. It really, really was. Yeah. I really enjoyed it. I worked hard on that movie. It was great. We shot it in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. So, in the heat, and it was great. And all these girls were just fabulous. And I didn't know Rebel prior to that. and we just clicked. And Anna Kendrick, who's amazing and
Oh,
so talented.
both of them are two of my favorite comedic performers. I
Yeah.
mean, amazing.
Yeah.
And watching Rebel Wilson's transformation herself, her physical transformation on social media has been a great inspiration.
Amazing. I'm telling you, is one of the hardest working actors out there. She's just amazing. She puts her mind to something and she does it. You know, she is just an incredible role model, I think, for people in this industry. And I'm just proud of her. I'm so proud of her.
She's also such a gifted comedic performer. Her timing and her is just impeccable. I mean, she really, she's terrific.
Right.
So again, like when you develop these relationships with actors and you can continue to work with them over the years, I mean, that's got to be a perk that not a lot of other jobs have that kind of perk, you know. And do you find that those ongoing relationships, are they beneficial to you?
Absolutely. Not only with actors, but producers, directors. That's how you get hired. That's how you sustain a career now, like for me, of 30 years is
right.
You know, it's like contractors where, you know, if you're a good contractor, they recommend you to other friends, you know, and you help them build their house. And that's what I kind of feel like for me is that I get recommended from other people. And that's how I've just sustained this career, which is crazy, for 30 years.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Now, do you have, as opposed to beauty makeup, as opposed to special effects makeup, do you have a preference, or do you like both? Yeah,
no, I like both. I like combining both.
Yeah, I mean, I love, you know, I grew up reading Fangoria magazine, and that was really, right. It was basically about makeup effects artists, you know. Right. It was great to one day make a film that actually did get in the pages of Fangoria. I'm like, well, now I've really.
Oh, that's big. You made it.
Yeah, I'm like, they did like a 5-page spread, and I'm like, yeah, wow. You know, show that. Wow. Were you like, what were some of your influences? Were you a movie fan growing up?
Absolutely. I loved going to the movies. I mean, Jaws was probably one of my favorites. American Werewolf in London.
Which won the first Oscar for makeup effects.
Right. Let's see, what else? Young Frankenstein, one of my favorites. Beetlejuice, I loved. Blade Runner, I thought was amazing.
Yeah.
That probably was one of the biggest influences. And Xanadu, I love, because I love horror, I love suspense, and I love musicals.
Sure.
You know, I like the kind of the guy movies more than like Con Air, you know, Crimson Tide, the chick flicks. I'm not, you know, I'm like, yeah, right. They're okay, but you know, I like the ones that give me a little more, you know, explosions.
the Simpson Bruckheimer school of movie making, right. Crimson Tide and Con Air, and
right.
Yeah, I mean, hell, I'm looking forward to Top Gun Maverick.
Oh yeah, I'm excited to see that one too.
If we ever get to see it. You know,
I know, fingers crossed.
They made it like 6 years ago, 7 years.
God, no.
Are we ever going to get it?
Yeah.
Is there a project that what would be a dream project for you that you have yet to work on?
Oh my God. That's a very good question. I don't know if I can answer that.
Right.
I mean, there's so many. I mean, you know, the Marvel movies are amazing. You know, I would love to do like a James Bond film.
Right.
You know, I love the thought of traveling the world and filming. One of the best parts of our job is being able to experience, you know, different cultures. Trying to work in, say, like the Dominican Republic that doesn't really have the infrastructure
right necessary.
You can't get things in and out. it's not like Amazon can just deliver to the Dominican Republic. So, you have to figure out ways to be creative and get things that you need to, suffice and achieve the same purpose. So
Sure.
I think, all of those are challenges in that respect. So I love the idea of like a No Time to Die, a James Bond film where it travels the world. There was a show that I watched on Netflix called Sense8.
Oh yeah, the Wachowskis
The Wachowskis.
and Michael Straczynski.
Yes. And that to me was amazing because how they had to film all those scenes in one country and then move to another country and go back and do other scenes that matched at the same time. So things like that, I think are the challenges that I would love.
Yeah, I mean that would be fantastic. As Sense8, it's funny. I too, when I watched that, I'm like, my God, this must have been logistically a difficult production.
I can't even imagine. Yeah.
Well, now let me ask you this. In a world now where people are using Instagram filters all the time, and how can somebody get into the business if you are interested in becoming working in makeup effects or beauty makeup? What would you advise people to do to begin a career like that?
Well, I think now you have to have an education first. I think what's interesting is that the Instagram makeup artists have brought an attention to being a makeup artist that we never quite had before. And then you had shows like Face Off that brought special effects makeup artists to the forefront, which is new for us because we're so used to being behind the camera. So that has really kind of given the focus now and a spotlight on what we do. And when people call me and they say, my daughter wants to be a makeup artist, would you mind, talking to her, mentoring her, whatever, or him? I always say that you have to be on the same playing field to play with these other artists. You have to go to school. You have to have an education. And so they're like, well, because I went to college and then went to makeup school.
Right.
I don't know if you necessarily need to still do that or not. I would never tell somebody not to go to college. I think college prepares you that's how I started in this career. It prepares you for your future. But also going to a makeup school gives you a skill. And so just like you go to an auto mechanics school, you go to a makeup school that teaches you how to be a makeup artist. So I know V has started her new school, Legends, in North Hollywood. And so I tell a lot of people, go to cinema, go to Legends, go to Mud, because those are the kids that have graduated and are currently working now. So you need to be on that same playing field. Doing makeup on yourself on Instagram is one thing, but getting paid to do makeup on somebody else is a whole different job.
Right. And it's there. And also you have to know, as a makeup artist, you've got to be a therapist. You have to know psychology.
Right.
You are dealing with, actors, of course, are not the most stable people in the world. Right. And they are, there's a lot of, they're in high pressure environments, and right. Their job is they got to look good, and you're actually painting on their faces in the morning when who knows what's happened to them the night before or whatever. And
right.
That's something else. I mean, and also to work in film, you have to understand how to work with all different kinds of people.
Right.
I've always liked movie sets because they're a microcosm. You've got the blue collar workers, you've got the white collar workers, you've got the elite producers,
right.
And then you have all people of all walks of life. That's why I love the sort of traveling gypsy caravan that is production.
Right.
And it's like unlike any other profession in the world, but you have to know how to deal with people.
Right. We are the traveling circus, but with a better dental plan.
Well, listen, I mean, this has been such a fun, it's been such a fun conversation talking with you. You said you were on social media already, so we know that.
Mhm.
I wanted to ask you, you do have a project coming up, which is Noah Baumbach's White Noise, which is an adaptation of Don DeLeo's book. And I'm a huge fan of his work. Is there anything you can tell us about White Noise? Because it's one of my most eagerly awaited movies that's
Ooh.
coming out.
I mean, those 10-page NDAs that we sign, I
Right.
have to be very careful of, but I know that it's already out there. It stars Adam Driver
Yeah.
and Greta Gerwig and this amazing German actor named Lars Eidinger, who's fantastic and such a joy to work with, as is Greta and Adam. And Noah, is a true visionary. And that was one of the hardest movies I think I've ever done.
Wow.
Yeah. It was about 5 months. I had the pleasure, and the reason why I took the movie in the first place was to be able to work with Ann Roth, the costume designer,
Mm-hmm.
who is a huge legend. And I'm so grateful for the opportunity to be working with her. And she and Noah and Greta are really good friends. So when, Anne and I talked on the phone, I was in the Dominican Republic, and she was like, okay, you're going to do this. And then she passed me, through to Noah and Greta. And I'm really looking forward to seeing, because that film, it was shot so beautifully. I'm very excited to see the final result.
Oh, me too. Just because I adored that book. I mean, that book really blew me away when I read it.
Yeah,
And I didn't
it
expect
was
it to.
very heavy. It was very
Yes.
heavy.
It's very heavy.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I'm just, it's interesting to see him tackle that material. So I'm just really excited that, well, one, that you worked on it, and two,
Yeah.
that it got made at all.
I know. I still get goosebumps. When I read that script, I was actually shocked. I was like, who's going to want to see this? Because it is a heavy, makes you think. And I don't want to spoil anything. So when
No.
people see it, but it is, I think it's very timely. I think it's a very timely project for where we are now in this
Absolutely.
world. So I'm excited that you are looking forward to it.
Oh yeah. I mean, when I heard it was getting, because there's so many books you think, no, they're never in this, especially in this day and age.
Yeah.
Where it's all comic book movies, or it's which I love, by the way, and all different kinds of IP. A book like White Noise, I would think maybe a streamer would make it or something.
Right.
But to see that Noah Baumbach got to make this, because I'm sure it was a passion project for him. He didn't just decide, well, I'm going to go make this book now. No, he had to have wanted to do it for a long time.
Absolutely. And Noah was the perfect person to tackle this.
Yeah.
He's similar to like a Spielberg or Quentin Tarantino, where there's no phones allowed on set. We weren't even allowed to have a monitor. So it was, he wanted you to be completely focused and absorbed onto what we were shooting on set that moment, that day, that month. He didn't want any distractions. So it was difficult in those terms, because if I don't have a monitor, I can't see what, if I have to change anything.
Right.
So, I really had to stand next to the camera for a second. I would do like, kind of a drive-by, so I didn't get in trouble. And go, okay, well, everybody looks great. And then I would step aside and just pray. So.
Well, that's
yeah, but I then started going to dailies and sitting with Anne, and the editor and watching everything to make sure that everything was okay. So,
Well,
but again, the DP Lowell was so amazing. He just brought such beauty to every set that I could actually exhale after a certain point.
right. Right. Well, I'm excited. And then, of course, you do have Shotgun Wedding. You mentioned that, the movie you were in the Dominican Republic
Right.
for.
Which is great with Josh Duhamel and Jennifer Coolidge.
Who can do no wrong.
Oh my God, she's brilliant. And Darcy Carden and an amazing cast. Amazing cast. Yeah. Cheech Marin.
Oh,
Sonia
really?
Braga. Yeah. I mean, it's unbelievable. And of course, Jennifer Lopez.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Who is stunning. I mean, I caught myself staring a couple of times. I had to go, Debbie, stop staring. Because she's just beautiful. Beautiful.
Yeah. No, she's amazing. And she's, ever since I saw her in Soderbergh's Out of Sight,
right,
I've been a fan of her as an actress. I think that she, in a way, it was unfortunate, like what happened to her, I think, because she was in Geely. I thought that was, and I'm a huge Martin Brest fan. That sort of derailed both Ben Affleck and Jennifer Lopez's career. And it's nice to see them both coming back because I think she's a phenomenal actress.
Right.
And it's I'll watch this. I don't know anything about this movie other than I knew it was getting made, but I'll see it just because of her.
Right. Well, that's the thing. I think, everyone has that one project in their past that they were like, oh, I did it for the money, or, oh, I didn't have anything else. My phone wasn't ringing, there wasn't anything else. So we all have that one project that you kind of go, oh,
but I mean, it was Martin Brest. I mean, the man made Beverly Hills Cop, and he made Meet Joe Black. There's one other project that I just realized that I wanted to ask you about. You worked on a Wim Wenders movie.
Yes.
And Wim Wenders made Wings of Desire, which is one of my favorite films of all time. But what was it like working on $1 Million Hotel?
That was really interesting. David Lynch is good friends with Wim.
Yeah.
And Wim needed a crew because he didn't know anybody out here. So basically, David gave Wim his whole crew. And so we went and we worked on it. It was downtown LA. Shooting a lot of nights, and we were at this hotel that was basically abandoned, but there were some low income people living in it, so we had to wear hard hats because they would throw baby diapers at us filled with stuff and needles that were used. Because we were keeping them awake at night, with the lights and the noise. And so it was a difficult project to shoot, but Wim, again, with just such a beautiful project, and Peter, the DP, and it just looked stunning. It was, every frame was a painting. It really was.
Yeah, it's an interesting film, and again, you've worked on these big movies with incredible casts,
Mel Gibson.
Yeah. But great stuff. Well, listen, Debbie Zoller, I want to thank you. This is a great interview. I want to thank you for being on the Designing Hollywood podcast. What a delight it has been to speak with you.
Thank you so much. It's been my pleasure going down memory lane here.
Well, thank you very, very much.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
And thanks to our sponsor, the United American Costume Company. Since 1977, the American Costume Company has provided wardrobe for hundreds of motion picture and television projects. Their authentic collection is known worldwide to members of the industry and is easily distinguishable on screen. The United American Costume Company can dress your entire cast with an eye for detail and authenticity. A special thanks to our producer and founder, Martika Ibarra, and of course, our co-founder, legendary costume designer, Marilyn Vance. Thank you to all of our viewers for tuning in, and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit that notification button. and you can find the Designing Hollywood podcast wherever you get your podcasts, also on iTunes. Follow me, Robert Meyer Burnett, on Instagram, on Twitter at BurnettRM, or find me on my own YouTube channel, The Burnett Work. Thanks for watching. We very much appreciate it.